Welcome back, all my 40k fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation to bring you another faction-focused video, and this one goes out to all of my cronies. Today, it is time to actually talk about the Canoptek Court. Now, what I have planned here is I'm going to today talk about the Canoptek Court detachment, and then I will be running a list that I will also be taking to battlegrounds and board games this weekend to play in a tournament. And then in the following weeks, I will go through all of the detachments. We'll sit down, take some time, go over the detachment, talk about what they can do, what they can't do, and then anyone out there can also correct me and help me find combos moving forward with those detachments. Today, however, the list is already locked in for what I will be taking, so the list that I am playing later on the channel, that's what I'm going to be taking to battleground and board games. Lists are submitted, lists are locked in, so that's what we're going with. But some of the other detachments, you guys can have some input and see some units out there, and as well, I'm a guy who you tell me this is the most competitive, this is a good unit, this is what you have to play, and I want to figure out how to not use that. So I will be using a lot of crazy things, bringing some units on the channel that may not typically see play that I think there might be a diamond in the rough there, and we'll mess around with all this cool stuff here. Now, again, with some of the detachments, it's going to be linear. You know, there's going to be some stuff that you just got to run. Like, I'm not going to do the Destroyer Cult detachment and run nothing but Lich Guard. That doesn't make sense. But for On the Nutshell, we want to try and bring other units to the table. You know, so it's not just every single detachment has 2 or 3 Catans in it or something like that. So today we will be starting with the Canoptek Court, and then we will move through all those other detachments and see what we can come up with, how they work on the table, and try and clear up some of the rules that may be confusing or not make sense. So, as always, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Turn on the bell to get notified on all the content we're bringing here on the channel, including my list description for the Canoptek Court that I will be taking to the tournament, and all the other Necron armies that we'll be doing for the rest of this month, and then probably move into AdMech. I do have a very large Adeptus Mechanicus army. I probably won't go into as much of a detail with it because I have a very... With AdMech, I like one specific style, and if I will use those units, and then some of the more Skitarii infantry, almost pseudo-Imperial Guard style army is not really what appeals to me. So it's castle and robots or bust for me. That's basically how it goes. So enough said about AdMech, enough talk about that, enough talk entirely. Let's talk about the Canoptek Court. So first thing with the Canoptek Court is the power matrix. So the power matrix is our detachment rule. Which this means is that we will be losing the +1 to hit for having a character in a unit. That is specific to the Awakened Dynasty, and that's some of the stuff that I want to talk about and we'll go over with this entire detachment is some of the things that we lose in place of that we've had as the old school Awakened Dynasty, the new Awakened Dynasty, kind of the cross between the two, and what we will be getting from this detachment in place of. So we will lose, if you have a character in a unit, you're not inherently getting +1 to hit. That is going to be away. So what do we get in replacement? Well, we get the power matrix. So first things first, we're going to work with this from bottom to top because this, I feel like that's the best way to understand this. So army-wide, if you take the Canoptek Court, all of your Canoptek and Cryptek units will get reroll 1s to hit. If the unit itself is wholly within a power matrix, they will then get full rerolls to hit. So this means that all Canoptek Wraiths, Canoptek Doomstalkers, Canoptek Sentinels, everything is going to get full rerolls to hit in a power matrix, but will have reroll 1s to hit for the course of the game if they're out of the power matrix. Any Cryptek units. Now, this is where it gets kind of tricky, but it's not too bad. And I actually really like how they did this. And there will be a follow-up video I'll be doing, going into more details with this on the keywords and how keywords function. But for all intents and purposes, and I'll explain it more in that video, any unit that is led by a Cryptek is a Cryptek unit. They gain the Cryptek keyword, etc., etc. If you want more explanations, go ahead and check out that video. I'm going to go into more details with it. But for just understand the Canoptek Court, that is a Cryptek joins a unit, they gain the Cryptek keyword. So that means that Immortals and Warriors are the only units that can be joined by a Cryptek, other than the Wraiths, which already have Canoptek, so we're not going to talk about that part of it. But the Warriors and Immortals, I like this a lot. In previous iterations of Canoptek armies, it really tried to not have you include warriors or immortals or anything like that. It would want you to include Crypteks and would build the army in a sense of like, okay, you just want to have a Cryptek in there, and that's all you really need. And in some ways, okay, fluff-wise, that was cool. Competitively, it would leave the army to have much to desire for a couple of reasons. One, the force organization charts of old, where we had to have troops and this and that, and it would really make it tough to build a good competitive Canoptek list within the restrictions of the fact of what units you could take, how many you could take of them, and then what you had to take as well. On top of it, a lot of those units never gained the benefits that your army would gain. Now, with this, you attach a Cryptek to Immortals or Warriors, they become a Cryptek unit, so they gain these same buffs, which I think is really, really cool. It allows us to have battle line infantry access inside this detachment so that we can run a legitimate army in a sense. And I think it fits for fluff-wise, too, that a Cryptek would have some of these, their thralls with them, that aren't Crypt thralls, that they're thralls, they're units with them. And there's a lot of benefits that it comes from gaining that. Because one, it seems like, oh, so any unit joined by a Cryptek is immediately a Cryptek unit. That's broken. Well, there's only two. So it's really not that broken. So now let's go back over into the power matrix and what this does. So this is the Demon Shadows rule. So Canoptek Court, in my opinion, is like Demon Votann in a sense for what their abilities play off of. With some of their abilities to boost, and one stratagem specifically, but some of their abilities to boost, it's kind of how it feels for me. So, but first of all, you have what their power matrix does. So the power matrix is if your home deployment zone. So when you look at one of the cards and you see your deployment zone in red, your opponent's deployment zone in green, assuming attack and defender, and then everything in the middle is no man's land. That's what you're looking at for the power matrix. So your home deployment zone is always a power matrix, no matter what. So any of your units that are wholly within, will get full rerolls to hit. Now, center, no man's land, can be your power matrix if you control at least half of the objective markers. So if in some missions where there's only two, because this middle one gets removed, you just need to have one. And now all of no man's land would be a power matrix, giving you full rerolls to hit for units wholly within. And then if you get your opponent's objective marker, you can turn your opponent's deployment zone into an objective marker. Now, it's very key to note that this is checked at the beginning of each phase. Each phase, this includes your opponent's. So at the end of your movement phase, if you move out there and you tag an objective, now we go to shooting phase. So at the beginning of the shooting phase, you check. Do you control half the objective markers in no man's land? If yes, boom, it's a power matrix. Where this, and then that's important there, but it also becomes very important into close combat because you have the charge phase and the fight phase. So after you complete your charge and you move, you may now control an objective marker. So when we move to the beginning of the fight phase to actually start making attacks, you have to check to see, do you control half and no man's land? If you do, the power matrix now turns on and you have full rerolls to hit at that time. So it's something to keep in mind when you're looking to launch an assault is at the end of that charge, will you now have a power matrix? If so, okay, cool, all full rerolls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and that is a huge boost overall. So that's how the power matrix works. If you guys have any questions, please ask them down in the comment section. For some it might seem complicated, but it's actually really relatively simple. Your home objective always is a power matrix. You get no man's land if you control at least half the objectives. And you have your opponents if you control their objective. And it's not the objective markers, it's not range of the markers, it's the entire part of the table that is registered as no man's land or deployment zones for the power matrix. And then if you're wholly within, you get full rerolls to hit. Otherwise, your army rerolls hit rolls of 1. Okay. Now, there are some other things that boost off the power matrix depending on what your army may have, and we'll cover those shortly. But first things we're going to do is we're going to go into the enhancements, because there is one in there that does go into those power matrix, and let's talk about that one first. So we have the hyper. We're gonna slow down, and we're gonna try and phonetically get these right. I know I'm gonna get my goal is to pronounce under two or less wrong. So let's see how we do here today. Okay. So first one we're going to talk about is the hyperphasic fulcrum. I think I got that one right. So this is only on a Cryptek, and all the enhancements can only be put on a Cryptek model, which is Plasmancer, Psychomancer, Technomancer, and Chronomancer. And Xeris, but Xeris is not allowed enhancements. None of the named characters are allowed enhancements. So Xeris and Trazen and Orkan, no enhancements there. So just out of the four, unnamed. So first we have the hyperphasic fulcrum. Cryptek model only. While the bearer is leading a unit, if that unit is wholly within your army's power matrix, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, re-roll a wound roll of 1. So first couple things, it is an attack. So this is both shooting and close combat, which makes it pretty good. This one is, I have to go back to the points. I want to say, I believe this one was 15 points. Yeah, it's 15 points for this one. So nothing bad there. A good place to throw 15 points if you have it late game. I think it's a great enhancement for Wraiths. Now being the fact that I probably should mention, especially with this attachment, Crypteks can join Immortals and Warriors, but specifically the Technomancer can join Wraiths, which is going to be a huge part of this detachment. You have Wraiths are at +1 wounds, so now they're 4 wounds apiece. And you now have a feel no pain. Wraiths are going to be a huge utility in the Canoptek court all around. I mean, there's going to be some other armies that are going to run them in general, but Canoptek court is where they're really going to shine at their best. So taking that Cryptek and putting a Technomancer in there, this is definitely, I would say, if you're going to take 3 enhancements, if you're going to take 3 out of the enhancements, I would rank this one number 2. I feel like this is the next place you go, based on points and based on abilities, to give a Wraith unit reroll 1s to wound in the power matrix, especially because of the fact that they're charging on an objective. We have a lot of rerolls to hit, but we don't really have a lot of things in the reroll to wound. And being that Wraiths are only AP1 off the Void Blade, off their blades, and that's the loadout that I take for them, you want as many to get through. You want to make your opponent have to roll as many dice as possible so that anything failed is 2 damage. And at AP1, there's a lot of abilities in the game that can get past that AP1 in combat and just go on their base save. You know, whether it's Void Armor, Armor of Contempt, True Silver Armor, etc. The list goes on. But there is a lot of ways to reduce that AP. And if that AP goes down to 0, that could cause some problems. So having that reroll 1s to wound can really help to be able to have a unit of Wraiths that's able to push a little bit tougher. I would say it would be the second on the choices that I would make for the relics to be taken for an army, just because of the fact that, especially with the Wraiths, being able to have that extra punch would be very necessary, but definitely not number 1. Because you have to be in a power matrix to be able to get that bonus, which very easy to get, but late game, if you're backpedaling and you're trying to make a late game push, you may not have that center power matrix. So this might be a little bit tougher to actually get that reroll 1s to wound, because you have to be in a power matrix to get that. All right, so moving on. I said that one was number 2. So let's talk about number 3. You know, because we can only take a maximum of 3 enhancements. So if we're taking maximum enhancements, the number 3 slot that I would take is the Auto Divinigator. Okay. I sometimes I feel like they just scrabble. Like there's right here in the back of the book, there's this thing that's called the Necron's name generator. And honestly, I kind of want to start using these on the channel, like just randomly generate a name for some of my characters and stuff like that for fun. I feel like sometimes that's what they do with the weapons. They're like, all right, we got some cool words. How do we combine them? And apparently someone just kept rolling the same dice when it came to the Space Marines because everything starts with the letter I. Irregardless, Auto Divinigator. So again, Cryptek only. And this is not a bad one. Each time your opponent gains a command point as the result of an ability, roll 1d6. On a 2-up, you gain a command point. So the only negative that I can see about this thing, and as I recall, is the fact that it's 15 points. 10 points, 10 points, I would put this one as the number 2 relic for the detachment, and I would almost have it as an auto include. I feel like there's only one auto include enhancement out of this list, and this is not it. And I put it at number 3 because of the fact that it costs 15 points. There are a lot of armies that have 0 abilities to be able to gain command points back at all. And 15 points is, if you do the math and you're building your army, 15 points is usually a spot where we don't have those extra points. We got to see that a lot with the previous point iterations, that it was really easy to put a centripetal weave for 10 points on anybody. If you didn't have a T-Catan that was already taken it was really easy to slap that in there because usually you had the 10 points left over. 15 points, typically we're not sitting there. Just with the way the math and the loadouts for a lot of units are, we're not sitting at 15 points left over. So that makes it kind of a little bit on the chintzy side, especially because once again, your opponent has to use an ability to gain command points, and then you can roll a dice. Now, what's great about it is you get it on a 2-up. A 4-up, it would be absolute garbage. 2-up, that's reliable. You can bank around that. So I think if the meta starts to evolve more, with more units having ways to gain command points, because if you take fixed objectives, fixed secondaries, you're not gaining any extra CP from discarding. So you're only gaining your 1 per turn. And then you don't have ways to gain it. So people are going to start to probably look for little ways to get it. We have Emotech, who can gain an extra command point there, and that's an ability that does so. Discarding a card is not an ability that gains that command point back. It's not one of the ways that can do this. So you're not able to gain, because it's not the result of an ability in that sense. So needless to say, the only way they're going to be able to gain command points back off this thing is if your opponent actually has a physical army ability that's gaining command points. I was able to use this going into Votann because Votann do have an ability to do so, but you really can't use this for your opponent discarding a card in that sense. So it's not an auto like, oh man, this thing is great. But if the game starts to progress more, where I think as more codexes come out, we will see armies having a couple more easier ways to gain command points off of discarding cards, or instead of discarding cards, so that more armies can play into a fixed style and still keep up with command points, where maybe it'll jump up a little bit better in price. But right now for 15, it's kind of a little pricey for what we're getting. Now, number 4, the one that I personally don't like, is the Metalodermal Tesla Weave. This is, again, Cryptek only. Once per phase, when an enemy unit selects the bearer's unit as the target of a charge, roll a d6. On a 2 through 5, they suffer d3 wounds. On a 6, the enemy unit suffers 3 mortal wounds. I don't like it. I don't like it because of a lot of reasons. That you look at some of our stratagems, and this is counterintuitive with 2 of our strats. One of which, that when our opponent charges or declares a charge on us, we can reanimate. So opponent charges. So now the opponent looks and goes, okay, I don't want to charge you because you're going to reanimate. Maybe if they question it, they're like, all right, maybe I'll charge. Like, okay, you're going to take mortal wounds. Okay, well, now I don't want to charge you at all. So I think this is going to be a charge deterrent, but not in the way we want. And not for, again, this one is relatively cheap in comparison, but still it's coming in at that. This one is 10 points. So it is cheap. So if you have 10 points left over, okay, you can slap it on, but where? If you're running Necron Warriors, okay, there you go. But the damage is so marginal and you can only do it once per phase that I don't see it really being the most effective way to deter your opponent from a charge or weaken someone's charge in that matter. I'm not a big fan of it. I think that we don't really want to completely deter our opponent from charging us, since we do have a strat that lets us heal off that. And we also have a lot of other strats that give us the like we have the ability to move away. So you're going to be like, well, if I stay there, they charge me, and then you stay in place, and then you get charged, and then you can do mortal wounds, but then you lose the unit. Or you spend a command point and you move away with the strat, and then you get shot at, or then you move away, and then you don't get charged, so you don't get to use the relics. So now you're wasting the 10 points on it, but your unit's still alive. So I don't personally like this one myself. I feel like this is, in my opinion, is the fourth. This is one that I probably will never really use. I mean, maybe if it drops down to 5 points, maybe I'd consider it. Maybe it lasts a little bit of 10. I think that's the only way that it really fits into any of my lists. Is the, well, I got 10 points left. Okay, we'll give this thing a try in my placement for it. But again, I think it kind of misdirects with what we want the army to do. Number one, the auto include, the best of the best. This is a brutal one. Dimensional Sanctum. I said that one right. The Dimensional Sanctum is very, very simple, very straightforward, and I mean 2 sentences technically, because one of them is Cryptek model only. Models in the bearer's unit have the infiltrate ability. What else do we have to say there? That's a squad of wraiths being deployed outside of your deployment zone on an objective to start the game to already give you your power matrix. That's immortals being in a forward position to bounce out and start shooting, which immortals are such a critical part of this detachment. That's a lot of different things. Well, 3 things particularly, because Cryptex, wraiths, immortals, or warriors. But that's a squad of warriors that you just put in front of your opponent and said, hey, by the way, here's a brick of warriors. So before you go and try and move across the field and do all this crazy stuff, hello, Eldar, here is 20 warriors at your back door. It's infiltrate. If you haven't had experience with a lot of units with infiltrate, or really haven't had experience with units with infiltrate, this is one you just right off rip. You need to pick a model, give that to them. It can be a chronomancer, it can be a technomancer, it can go into a lot of different things. Like, this isn't like, oh, you have to put it with this unit, it has to go on this model, it has to do this, that's it. There is 3 options: warriors, wraiths, and immortals. And there is options for all 3. And that's what I think makes a good enhancement, is that it's not just one unit that can use this. It's multiple units that have it in different ways. That's what also makes it an auto include, is again, multiple units can use this in multiple ways. This is one you have to play with for yourself. I can sit here and talk about different combinations and how this works. There's times where I've used it just to get 3 or 4 inches outside of my deployment zone, and it's critical. Infiltrate ability in general. So if you haven't used a lot of infiltrate abilities, this is one that I'd start messing around with. Definitely, you know, when you're playing a game at a buddy's house, if you are a competitive player and you're looking to start playing at tournaments and doing stuff at a tournament and you're getting in some practice games with a buddy, this is one thing that I would definitely say, hey, I haven't used infiltrate that much. Let's talk about this. What can this do? Where could I be for this? And start practicing and utilize that. If you are playing more casual, this is still an excellent relic to use, and you can use it in very, very strong ways to be able to just have warriors in a more forward position to be able to keep up with your wraiths and do things like that. And I think that this is just, in my opinion, the best of the best. All right, so we covered the enhancements, we covered our detachment rules. There's only one thing left: stratagems. So stratagems. We're going to go straight down, and we're going to do all the 1 command point ones first. Then we're going to talk about the 2 command point one last, because that's going to be a very, very critical. But before we go into that, I want to take a break from that and talk about some of the units that we have access to, because it's very important to talk about with like some of these detachments, what units we have that can really gain off the buff in here, and just kind of really quickly go through them and give a thumbs up or thumbs down to these units, what we have available as far as Canoptek and that. So first, the non-Canoptek units. Warriors, I give them a thumbs up. I mean, they're cheap. 10, rough, I think they went down to like 10 points a model, basically, if you look at it that way. It's like 100 points for 10, 200 points for 20. Let's take a look real quick. Necron Warriors. Yeah, I was right. I just want to make sure. They're grunt troops. You know, their reanimation is weaker than it was before, but you're getting 20 guys. You can give them a feel no pain. You can give them a 4-up invuln if you want to take Orkin. They're a battle line unit, so they gain buffs off Xeris. Xeris is a Cryptek as well. So they really do fit and synergize well. They are grunt basic troops, and I give them a thumbs up. Immortals, 2 thumbs up. If I had a third set of hands, they get 3 thumbs up. If I had a fourth set of hands, they get 4 thumbs up. I will not go into all the details of them just yet and how brutal they are. The more you run, you definitely want to run Xeris. You can get away with just running one squad. I'm running just one squad right now, and I think it's perfectly fine. But you can run a bunch of these guys. They are insane. They are amazing. They are just 17 thumbs up, 27, a million. They are phenomenal. We'll get to them in a minute. Tesla, amazing. Gauze Blaster, not right now. Now is not its time. Gauze Blaster is only AP1, which again, a lot of stuff can block that with cover. They are lethal hits with 2 shots, but they don't have rapid fire like they did in previous editions. And now with the change in range, they're the exact same range as Tesla. Tesla has way more that it does out of this detachment, and we'll talk about them in a minute with that stuff when we get down to some of the strats. Tesla being sustained 2, full rerolls to hit, you're looking at a bunch of hits. And I think that's important to stop for a second and say, when we talk about full rerolls to hit, the wording on these abilities, you are allowed to reroll all to hit dice. So with a unit like Immortals that it typically hits on a 3, that doesn't stop you from picking up all of your hits and fishing for 6s, which is a term that we typically use. So, you have a squad of 20 or 10 that has 20 shots, and you roll the dice and you get like 5 6s. So you put those 5 6s aside. Now you have a bunch of them that are hits and a couple that are misses. You scoop them all up and you re-roll all of them because you're allowed to. You're allowed to re-roll any and all hit dice because it doesn't say misses. It says re-roll the dice to hit. So you can re-roll those hits in that way. I have actually seen players that needed to do a little bit of damage and have re-rolled hits to try to get misses, so they didn't do too much damage, so they still had a charge target for the next phase, but were able to chip away enough damage to kill the unit. So realize that, and with units like the Immortals that have sustained 2, every 6 is 2 additional hits. So fishing for 6s and power matrixing those units with a Cryptek enemy is so huge. Character-wise, Xeris, if you got a lot of battle line, he's awesome. He's a Cryptek. Orkin, if you're running some warriors to give him a 4-up invuln, that's going to be great. That's going to be really tough and bulky. He didn't change. Trazen, I give him a thumbs down. The sticky objectives is cool. Maybe out of the Hyper Cryptek Legion or the Hyper Vault Legion or whatever, the teleporting one, he might be a little more useful. But typically, all in all, what he does is not that great. He doesn't, because he can kill one of your guys and take the place of it, but it's like, that's not that good. So he thumbs down on him. Overlord and the Overlord with translocation. So in my opinion, anytime you're taking an Overlord, if you're going to spend the points on an Overlord, you might as well spend the points and just get him. Get the Overlord with the transdimensional shroud. Auto advance 6. So with the Immortals having assault weapons on the Tesla, you can move them really far and still shoot. So I think that he is just significantly better. The regular Overlord only reduces damage by 1 for just him. And we don't have Immortal or Lich Guard really access because no Crypteks can join a Lich Guard. So they're not going to gain any buffs in this army. So you're probably not going to take them. So in my opinion, Overlord Transdimensional, he's good. He gets a thumbs up. Lightweight. He's good with the Immortals. I mean, if you're taking Immortals, you're going to at least want one of him, and we'll get onto that in a minute because what he can do. He has a Resurrection Orb, so he can heal a little bit better in there. It's the Res Orb change now. It's once per game at the end of any phase. Reanimate D6 models in that unit. But the standard Overlord, I'm going to give him a thumbs down. He's the exact same point as the Transdimensional Overlord, and he just reduces damage to himself. So he doesn't gain any enhancements, no real extra abilities. You do get a couple other combat weapon options, one that goes up to damage 3, but you get one less attack. I have to say, nah. If you're gonna take an Overlord with your Immortals, you're gonna take the Transdimensional Shroud for the extra move, since Tesla's Assault. Technomancer, thumbs up, absolute gold. 5-up, feel no pain for the unit he joins. He joins Wraiths, guaranteed, because he gives them a 5-up, feel no pain. Amazing. And also helps for their leadership, which is necessary. Wraiths, this, amazing. There are grunt troops, there are objectives, they can do it all. They're not the most damage dealing at only coming in at AP 1 they have the whip coil option, which gives them 8 attacks, AP 0. And I feel like that is just redundant with some of the other weapons that we can get out of here. So staying on the claws, this is a unit that you want to put the claws on, because we need some damage dealers. We need some damage output. If you take the whips, you're taking the damage away. And this is a unit that can actually get the damage. So I definitely recommend taking the claws on the Wraiths, just because there's so much other stuff out of the Canoptek Corp that can just fire for days. 4 wounds apiece, 4-up invuln, move through walls because they're beasts, fast, they can move over units and do damage. All around, great unit. You're going to see them all over the place, especially in here. I'm running 2 6-mans. But we were around the characters. Psychomancer, still got to give him a thumbs down. I don't think his ability is really that impacting. I think that there needs to be other stack effects to really make his ability stick. And just all around, he's taking the spot that other Cryptechs like the Chronomancer could take. Chronomancer, amazing Cryptek again. Defensive playstyle, he gives you the -1 to hit on the unit that he's joined, and fire and fade mechanic, which means after you shoot with the unit and after you resolved all of its shooting, you have to at least shoot, you can then move with the unit 6 inches. So, even if you can only shoot with one guy, as long as one guy shoots, the whole unit can then move 6 inches. This can be ways to steal objectives, or I like my personal favorite, jump back behind a wall to be in a safe position for the next turn. Plasmancer, in an aggressive playstyle, he gets a thumbs up. In aggressive playstyle, he works out great. Any of those units that you put him in, he gives them the ability to crit on 5s. Sorry, a lot of going really quick with it. Loss of oxygen. Not enough coffee, I guess, today. But if you're an aggressive player and you like to play on a more offensive base, best defense is a strong offense. I'm of the opposite mindset. The best offense is a strong defense. They do the work. They put in that work. They're relatively cheap. They are Cryptechs. They can gain some of these enhancements that we talk about, and they're wonderful. Immortals, again, with the sustained hits, being able to crit on 5s is great. I mean, I can't say anything really bad about them. So I gotta say, give them a thumbs up. Now, personally, for me, I don't think I necessarily will run these guys very much, because I'm more of a defensive style player. And also, it is crits to hit, so it doesn't affect the wounds. It's only criticals to hit. But still, I mean, sustained, that's a lot of extra hits on 5s. And now less dice that you're fishing because you have more of them hitting. So I think they're really, really good. And then that's it for the characters, really. I probably forgot somebody. And then as far as the actual Canoptek, Wraiths, thumbs up all day. Scarabs, thumbs middle. Scarabs got a little bit better with being able to do objective control, so out of this detachment, they can do very well. Being able to re-roll their lethal hits also makes them do very well. Blowing up for mortal wounds also makes them do very well. However, they have to be by a Cryptek to get +1 objective control. If they're not, then they fall significantly down the chain because they're not able to hold secondaries late into the game. And a lot of opponents will be able to identify that and know that, so they may not go after them initially and clear everything else and go, okay, well, I cleared all this. Now your Scarabs are OC0, so I don't really have to deal with them that much. Spiders, I love them. I love them all day. The big thing that spiders bring is they give the Gloom Prism, 5-up Feel No Pain aura for psychic attacks and mortal wounds, as well as being able to give vehicles a 6-up Feel No Pain. They are vehicles themselves, so they will have a 6-up Feel No Pain. Toughness 7, 6 wounds, and the Particle Beamer. This is one of the ways that we actually get damage through, because one thing that is to note with this army, yes, we can reroll hits, but how are we actually doing the damage, you know? We have lethal possibilities off of things like Immortal Blasters, if you want to take them, Necron Warriors, the Scarabs, and that. So we do have that lethal option. And then we have things like the Canoptek Doomstalker, which is a Canoptek unit with full rerolls to hit at a high strength, high AP, 3 flat damage, is a very good unit. You know, and Doomstalker, obvious thumbs up. The spiders, although we don't have the rerolls to wound, we can proc so many hits with these guys that we're going to roll some 6s. And on top of that, they also double as a strong combat unit because of the fact that they do have a good profile that if in a power matrix, which we're hopefully going to be, they can reroll those hits. Being that they're a vehicle, they can tank shock, so if we can get extra damage out of there. So I think the spiders are still very, very strong. In my defensive playstyle, I like them very much. In some other more aggressive offensive playstyles, people may switch them out for scarabs to be able to have scarabs that can slam, do damage, explode, and all that stuff, and I get that. And that might be something I mess around with later on, because I do like the scarabs as well, but I love me some spiders. Who else am I forgetting for the Canoptek in Codex units? We got the Wraiths, we got the Spiders. Oh, the Reanimator. Oh, the Reanimator. Thumbs down. But I don't think impossible. He's not completely impossible. He still gives plus D3 for the reanimation. So, and he is a Canoptek unit, so we get full rerolls to hit. I tried him versus Lane in a recent matchup. His role was supposed to be back there with the Doomstalkers and just heal them. But a big thing about this detachment is now I don't have to keep the Doomstalkers all in the same position, so it's kind of redundant. He got ignored. He does still have his 4-up Feel No Pain, which makes him tough to deal with. He got ignored and was able to make it all the way to center field and do some work from there. But I could spend that 75 points on another Spider. So I could see if you do a lot of warriors, if you do an army with a lot of warriors and Xeris, I could see throwing 3 reanimators down to deal with some secondary objectives, stay back on some objective markers, and maybe assist the warriors and just kind of be a distraction that your opponent's like, oh, well, every time you reanimate, this is going to happen, so I probably should try and take it out. So I could see definitely some routes around that, but more times than not, that 3-inch range is just going to be too tight for it really to make a difference and matter. All right, so we talked about the Reanimator, we talked about the Scarabs, we talked about the Spiders. So I think we've covered all of the Codex Canoptek units. Forge World. So the Construct is not Canoptek, so we'll talk about him. So then we have the little Archaeothopter, and this does not count to my one misproduction. My 2 mispronunciations. Those only count with the Codex. They're little like flying wraith things. They're not that good. They're not that good because of the fact that you can't put a character with them. They have low wound count, low toughness. They can reduce something's armor if they hit it, but there's still a high enough point value that they're going to get hit and they're going to get beat up. They would need to have their points reduced or get them into a point of like locust destroyers are, where you can take 1 to 6, and then you can take one that's able to get out there, hit, do damage, and maybe die, and just to reduce something's armor down. But all in all, I don't really necessarily think that they're going to be. I don't think they're that strong in aspects of other things. Canoptek Tomb Stalker. So a lot of people are down on this thing, but I actually really like this thing. It's got a better combat profile at strength 6, -1/2 damage. It also plays into some of the things that our army does, where we want our opponent to charge us so we can react to those charges, in the fact that it can heroic intervention for 0. Its gun leaves a lot to be desired with that gauze flare, but again, it is a gauze weapon. I have to double check it, but I'm pretty sure that means lethal hits. So that's a lot of shots, and now the only thing about it that I'm not a big fan of is it is more expensive at 130 points, and its gun does only do 1 damage, but it lethal hits, and it actually has a combat profile at strength 6, AP 1/2 damage, which can be nice. Canoptek Tomb Sentinel, on the other hand, this guy, the other centipede, the centipede with the exile cannon. So the exile cannon is really, really good. And although lethal hits are nice, this thing's D6 +1 blast. Not only is it D6 +1 blast, but it can reduce the AP of any target that is within range of an objective marker, and can increase its basically gain armor contempt and reduce AP of weapons against it if it's in within range of an objective marker, which makes this thing significantly more durable than, its counterpart. On top of it, it would get an AP1 if charging units on objective markers. And with the style of this army and us really wanting to take those center the objective markers in no man's land to turn on for power matrix, he plays into it very well because of where he wants to go, and what he wants to do is what the army wants to do entirely. So I don't think the Stalker is completely garbage. I definitely think it being more expensive at 130 points is kind of rough. If it were to drop down a little bit, maybe at 115 or even significantly or less than the Sentinel, it would see play. I would definitely play it. But I think people are very, very harsh on it right now because it doesn't have like the exile cannon, high AP, high damage. And I get it, especially with this detachment, because we need stuff that's going to actually put damage through. We can hit with a lot of stuff. It's just making it stick. And that's basically it for all of the units. We went through, I'm pretty sure. If I forgot one, I am terribly sorry. But I think I got all of them in there, all the Canoptek units. Now let's get over to the strats and call this thing a wrap, because I know that we got this video running kind of long. So let's talk about some stratagems. So the first one of the 1 command point strats is Curse of the Cryptek. And for simplistic purposes, we're just going to talk about how it works. You use this when one of your Crypteks die. So your Cryptek dies, spend a command point, and then what happens is the unit that just killed that Cryptek, for the rest of the game, they get a judgment token. For loosely speaking. Basically, for the rest of the game, any Canoptek unit, only Canoptek, not Cryptek, that makes an attack against that unit gets +1 to hit and +1 to wound. Okay, that's nice. That's good. I mean, I don't see any problem with that. +1 hit, +1 wound. So someone like Angron comes in, whoops one of your Crypteks. Okay, cool. Hey, I'm going to get +1 to hit and +1 to wound against him for the rest of the game. Awesome. Solar Pulse. This is a great one. This is a great one. So for 1 command point, you do this at the start of your shooting phase. So right at the beginning, you go, okay, I'm moving to the shooting phase. I'm going to spend a command point and Solar Pulse that objective marker. And that objective marker must be within 18 inches of a Cryptek model, first condition. Then, any unit that shoots at an enemy unit that's within range of that selected objective marker ignores cover. Awesome. Awesome. There's a lot of things that get covered really easily. There's a lot of ways to do it. So having a strat, having that ability, beautiful. Reactive subroutine. This is one command point, and you use this in your opponent's movement phase just after the enemy unit ends a normal move, advance, or fallback. One Canoptek unit from your army that is within 9 inches of that enemy. So your opponent moves forward or your opponent falls back, but it's where the unit finishes its move. So if a unit is within 9 inches and then moves out of 9 inches, that does not trigger this. It's if a unit finishes its move within 9 inches of one of your units, you can then immediately say, stop right there, I have a response. One command point, you can then immediately move that unit 6 inches in any direction. You can move forward towards an objective to take an objective or block a movement, or you can move back to go further away and make a charge impossible potentially at that point. And this also combos well with another secondary or another stratagem, which we'll talk about in a minute. Counter temporal shift. I actually think I'm doing a pretty good job of getting these right. When your opponent's shooting phase, using your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has selected its target. One Canoptek unit that was selected as a target for one or more attacking units. Okay, this is our chaos, and this actually works well with the previous one. Basically, in the advanced rule sections, this is how this works. Your opponent says, I'm going to shoot at that squad of wraiths. You say, I'm going to spend one command point and use counter temporal shift. Now, for the rest of the turn, your opponent can only target that unit with ranged weapons if they are within 12 inches of that unit, inherently kind of giving them lone operative ability. That's why you hear that a lot of saying like, oh, this gives lone op, because it basically does. It gives the definition rule for lone operative. So if your opponent declares and they shoot at that unit and you say, okay, I'm going to spend a command point and now you can't shoot at that unit, your opponent can then redeclare the unit that fired, but it is instantaneous. So right as your opponent is about to put a bunch of dark lances into a squad of wraiths, you go, no, one command point, you're outside of 12, they're alive, they're doing well. So that's a huge huge stratagem, and is one that I'm still getting used to having such a powerful stratagem at my disposal. Using that with the reactive subroutine works out really well because you can move back and then your opponent goes to shoot and then you say, nope, I'm 12 inches away, so now you can't shoot at me. Maybe that one unit can shoot at me, but the rest of your army cannot. You shoot at me with the one unit. Oh, you popped a wraith. Okay, my turn comes, reanimation protocol, boom, my wraith's back, and nothing of note was lost. Huge stratagem. Suboptimal facade. So, in the previous iterations, there's two big things to realize and keep in mind with this detachment. One, we cannot stand our characters back up. We no longer have one command point stand a character back up. And number two, our reanimation trigger is different. So our old one for Awakened Dynasty was one command point. You can target a unit that just lost a model in it and activates reanimation protocol when an enemy unit finished its attack sequence. Now, we don't have that. Instead, your opponent's charge phase just after an enemy unit declares a charge. So the charge does not need to be successful. Keep that in mind. So if your opponent tries to pitch a 9-inch charge onto your unit and goes, okay, well, I'm going to try long bomb a 9, you can spend a command point and then activate reanimation protocols. With the reduction of things like the reanimator and stuff like that, not going to be that game breaking. I mean, at most you might get a wraith model back or heal a wraith back up to full. So it's not the most game breaking. You're not saving a command point to trigger this every single time, but it's nice to know it's there. However, that is the only way. And realistically, with looking at a lot of reanimations with this army, and a very important thing to talk about is Technomancers heal. Technomancers at the end of the movement phase, let me double check. I want to make sure that it's at the end and not the beginning. But the Technomancers had the ability to heal D3 wounds. This is not a reanimation protocol roll. This is literally just healing. And it is at the end of your movement phase. So your command phase, you reanimate. So you reanimate your squad, you reanimate a guy, you get a wraith back in the squad with 1 or 2 wounds on it. Then at the end of your movement phase, you can then heal that wraith for D3 from the Techno. You know, if he's got 3 wounds on him, he's missing 1, and you roll a 3, yeah, that Wraith goes back to full wounds, but you don't get a Wraith model back because it's not a reanimation roll. It is just healing that one specific Wraith that took damage from the Techno. So it's the combination basically means that if you're down a model, you have a really good chance of bringing a full wounded Wraith back into the squad. With 4 wounds apiece, it's going to be tough. There's going to be sometimes it's going to be like a 50-50, honestly, because if one of your Wraiths goes down, if you have a Wraith left with 1 wound on it, reanimation happens first. And if you roll that 3 and heal that Wraith up to full, okay, that Wraith's now back up to full. You don't heal with the Techno. You did not get a Wraith model back. So, and then if you have a Wraith with 2 wounds on it, you need to roll that 5 or 6 to get D3 wounds back to be able to get a Wraith with 1 wound remaining. And then as you get, obviously, as the Wraiths have more and more health, it becomes easier, but, it's still dice. It's still dice on it. So that is the Canoptek Corp. Lot to talk about there. A lot of stuff. With some of the other detachments, I'll try and break these videos down and squish them a little more. This is probably one that I'm most excited about because of the different units I get to use. One unit I didn't talk about that is definitely a huge positive. Again, this comes into the offense-defense kind of mindset of it is, if you are a more aggressive player, definitely look into the C'tans. I would rank it Nightbringer first. If you want a second, Void Dragon I would go next just because his anti-tank options are great. And then number 3, Transcendent. I wouldn't even look at the Deceiver for this army. I don't feel like the Deceiver brings a lot into here. But I would rank them definitely Nightbringer, Void Dragon, Transcendent. So if you have reasons that you may like to have the Transcendent, cool. But now the Transcendent can't have enhancements. He's quicker. He is much quicker. And he could keep up with things like the Wraiths or an Infiltrator Wraith. So that might be a mindset to go, oh no, I want a T-Catan in there. But number 1 is definitely the Nightbringer. Nightbringer, one of the things that the detachment has kind of a lacking in overall is the overall foil push damage. And as I said that, I almost forgot one of the most important stratagems to talk about. The 2 command point stratagem, and one of the most busted and broken things that I'm sure at some point is going to get nerfed. And here we go. Here's one that I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. All right, let's do it. Cynosure of Eradication. Would that be C-Y-N-O? Cynosure of Eradication. All right. So this is our 2 command point strat. Basically, very simple. You can use this in the shooting or fight phase. At the start of the shooting or fight phase, you have to do the beginning. And you select a Cryptek or Canoptek unit. So a unit led by a Cryptek or a Canoptek unit. And that unit treats all weapons as having devastating wounds until the end of the phase. Immortals. So, there's a lot that can go into this, and a lot of things you can say, oh, you can give it to this guy, you can give it to that guy, you can do this to it, blah, blah, this, that, and the other. The critical portion of this whole show is the Immortals. So, the combo is, and now seeing this, you take a squad of Immortals, and you give them Tesla. So now they have 20 shots, 10-man squad. I have 20 shots with sustain 2. Because of the power matrix, they have full rerolls to hit. Cool. You're going to build up a bulk of hits. So now we go to roll the wound. We're only strength 5, we're AP 0, 1 damage. So devastating wounds would be very nice. Okay, so we're going to target them with this stratagem, and now they have dev wounds. And then when you look at the Immortals' inheritability, well, they're going to get to reroll 1s to wound. And if you're in range of an objective marker, if the target's in range of an objective marker, that's full rerolls to wound. So now, once again, we're taking this big bulk of dice that we just built up off their hit rolls and their sustain, and now we're chucking it for devastating wounds and going for 6s. Whew, that's juicy. Though I know what probably thinking, you're like, yeah, but 2 command points, that's pretty rough. I wish it wasn't 2 command points. Wish it was only 1. Well, I disagree with you. I disagree with you wholeheartedly. I think it should be 0. And that's where he comes in. Because now you have a guy that can give you a free advance. You have Tesla weapons, which are assault. So you can advance and shoot. And on top of it, he has my will be done. Target with a first time, this battle round, I'm sorry, I'm butchering it, but once per battle round, you can target a unit with a strat and make it cost 0 command points. But wait, DJ, that only works for battle tactics per the updates and FAQs and erratas. You are right. Guess what? The blah, 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 I can't say it, of eradication is a battle tactic stratagem, which means that you can target the mortals for 0 command points. And at the course of the game, you are looking at a unit that if you're on an objective, they're going to reroll all the hits, all the wounds, and sustain 2, devastating. Ugh, that's just death. Just death. I mean, the amount of things that they could just do damage to inadvertently that they shouldn't be able to hurt is going to be huge. And I think that when we start seeing FAQs and erratas, I'm pretty sure that stratagem is going to change. Either they're not going to allow it to target Cryptek units, which would mean that you couldn't get it for free on the Immortals, or it's no longer going to be a battle tactic and go over to something else, so it can't be 0. Because I think right now I love it. I'm going to be running it. I'm going to use it competitively, but I definitely can see where that might be a little too much of the tip scale. Otherwise, I don't see this army as being completely too broken and busted. If I were to make any predictions on what could possibly change in balanced data slates and data sheet updates, I could see the Wraiths going up a little in points. I think that they're relatively undercosted, but their damage output is low, so I could see them going up a little. Not to the point where they're completely unplayable, but maybe just slightly, because it's 220 for 6 right now. I could see them going up to maybe 240 for 6 and 120 for 3. So that little bit of an increase would be considerable. Other than that, everything else is like the damage output is lacking. So yeah, cool. We can hit for days, but we got to be able to finish them off. And in order for us to hit, we got to be out there and taking seconders. So I think that in general, it's not that bad. It's just the Canoptek court is significantly better than some of the other detachments that we see available in the game right now. So, all right, guys. Well, hopefully you got some information from this video. Again, I'm going to try and make some of the other detachment videos a little bit shorter. And I also plan on recording a video to talk more about this keyword mechanic, because it's something that definitely gets highlighted a lot more in the Necrons than in other armies. And it's definitely a relevant point for how the game is played and how things are functioned. So, all right, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully it helps you out and help with some of the gameplay. And I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching.